wrong angle. Good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, as always, very proudly, right here on historic Market Street in Corning. Well, what a surprise. Did you see that coming? Look, I'm starting with questions already. Feel free, if you're new to the program, you can text that number on the bottom of the screen. Did you expect Walz? I honestly did not, and that's just an indication of how I don't like the media's mindset. We heard this so much back in 2016. Boy, the best thing that could happen to Hillary Clinton was Republicans picking Donald Trump as their nominee. You know, there's always those, oh, you made a foolish mistake. I'm not saying that at all. Walz may turn out to be a great VP pick for Harris. But I don't see the reasoning from a political standpoint why you don't go with Shapiro unless, as many have said, because of the not wanting to be labeled, Genocide Joe like Joe Biden was, the whole issue of Shapiro being Jewish. Was it that? We know that Biden caved on his core beliefs because I say core beliefs, but you understand what I mean. When it comes to Israel for that vote because of the polling, I don't know why you don't go with Shapiro. So I was shocked. I was prepared to come on the show this morning after the announcement and announce hours later that it was going to be Josh Shapiro, but it was not. It was Walz. So what was your initial reaction when you saw that? We're going to talk a lot about Walz this morning. We're going to talk about the campaign in general, Trump's campaign, quite a few New York State issues as well. First, let's start a little differently on a couple of updates and a couple of maybe stories that'll be tough to segue to. We'll start with that. And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty when it comes to the VP nod to Tim Walz. And we'll learn a little bit more about him today. We'll learn things that you may not get elsewhere. You will not get elsewhere. I'm not going to say may. You will not get elsewhere. Okay, but first an update on everyone's favorite super mayor. We have not heard from super mayor Tiffany Henyard in quite some time out of Dolton. They're now calling her the Dolton dictator. Mayor Tiffany Henyard, if you recall, we brought her up quite frequently for a weird stretch of time there. Just some things such as using taxpayers' dollars to put posters up throughout the town with her picture on it, lavish trips, using the police as her personal protection. And then there were all these questions about funding and how the city had lost so much money in her short tenure. And so when they called for an audit that unanimously passed on the board, she vetoed it, which is not a typical thing you do on an audit. Well, now in another blow to her power, the board of the village, I think I said city, I meant village. The board has voted to freeze the credit cards of the village. Dolton's director of administrative services will only be allowed to use the village credit card after the board approves of the purchase. Quote, this village has so many people with so many credit cards. They're swiping like crazy. And that's why I had to come to a complete halt, said lawyer Michael McGrath, who is representing Dolton's trustees. There's thousands and thousands of dollars for Amazon purchases, for PayPal, for Target, for Walgreens, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Another lawyer for the trustees said the main goal was to cut off her access, meaning Mayor Tiffany Henyard's access and other operators in the municipalities. Henyard has faced accusations of misappropriating taxpayer money to cover personal expenses, including lavish travel and security that was not necessary. Now, she is under a federal probe. By the way, when I call her super mayor, that's the name she gave herself. She is under a federal probe. There's some allegations that she was strong-arming residents, saying if you don't donate to my charity, your business may be shut down. And one person had that actually happen to them, allegedly. But continuing, the feds have requested a trove of documents from the village, as well as a restaurant Henyard owns and other ventures. Ooh, she's got her hands in a lot of pots. That's interesting. The controversial leader has angered colleagues and residents, including on Monday night, watching as the village is being run into the ground, said one resident who attended the meeting. We deserve a mayor that truly cares about our village and not a mayor who sees our village as her personal playground. Before the meeting started, attendees already seated were forced to get back up and go through the metal detectors that weren't initially working. During the meeting, a handful of village jobs were slashed following a 4-1 vote, but Henyard, who has described herself as Dolton's supermayor, argued the layoffs were political retaliation by the trustees. She said the workers who were supposedly cut would still be employed in the village of Dolton. The village is bleeding, trustee Brittany Norwood said. If residents knew the truth, they'd hit the roof. Now, why do I mention this? We're nowhere near Dolton, Illinois. The reason we've always brought up the supermayor, the Dolton dictator, both very good names if she decided to take up boxing. The reason we bring up Tiffany Henyard is it's such a prime example of local elections meaning more than you may realize. You know, very often you go in to vote on election day and you go, oh man, I went to school with this person's kid, or I went to, maybe not doing the research. And we've all been guilty of it. But that's why, and this, I've said this numerous times, is almost a public service announcement. That's why I think this show is so important, because we're taking the time to have as many candidates on as we can, so you know who you're voting for in a time when the media landscape has shifted so much, where it is very hard to do the research on candidates. If it's a small local race, they may have a Facebook, they may have a website, but they may have neither. So how do you find out about your candidates, even at a time when there's unfortunately a lack of meet the candidates forums and the like? So we try to give you the opportunity to learn about your candidates, because yes, is this maybe the ultimate example of knowing who you voted for? Yes, perhaps. But it's also, I think, again, a PSA, a public service announcement, that it shows us all, let's take the time out of our busy schedules to do the research, so that, I mean, all indications are she's running the village into the ground financially in her short tenure as the mayor. So just something, as me getting on my soapbox, encouraging everyone to do the research and not just vote for someone because, well, they've been there forever, or I think I remember them from some event I was at. Actually do the digging, do the research, maybe attend some village, town, city boards, and councils to find out how your money's being spent. And remember, I've said it a million times, but we've talked with so many guests on this program. When it comes to your day-to-day life, yes, it is very interesting to talk about the VP race, the presidential race. And it does affect your life, obviously. But at the local level, there's perhaps no one that affects your life at a government level more so than the local boards and councils. Okay, another couple of quick updates. And again, please weigh in on the VP pick, which we are going to talk about extensively this morning. But Representative Cori Bush, another member of the squad to be ousted. We know that Bowman was booted not that long ago. Cori Bush has lost her Missouri Democratic primary race to Wesley Bell in another blow to the squad. Cori Bush was dealt a stunning defeat in the 1st Congressional District of Missouri, or Missouri, depending on who you're talking to, making her the second member of the far-left squad of congressional lawmakers to lose a primary. Bush lost her primary race to St. Louis County Prosecutor Wesley Bell by a 5.3 percentage point margin. Wow. Bell leading Bush 51 to 45.7. This comes after Jamal Bowman, his loss in June. He was easily routed by around 17 points by George Latimer. Now, you can say it's because of her radical policies, her radical stance on Israel, her radical stance just in general. She was an early supporter of the ceasefire and in the Israel-Hamas war, and has been critical of the Jewish state. in the aftermath of the October 7, 2023 terrorist attack. We've actually talked about her quite extensively. She was one of only 2 House lawmakers, along with Rashida Tlaib, to vote against a measure seeking to ban the Hamas terrorists involved in the October attacks on Israel from ever entering the U.S. She voted against that. So you and I may say, well, it's because of her radical agenda that did not represent the people of Missouri's 1st Congressional District. Well, that's not how the New York Times puts it. I received this in my email this morning. Cori Bush, squad member and vocal critic of Israel, loses her primary. Well, how did she lose? Quote, she fell to a campaign by powerful pro-Israel political groups intent on ousting a fierce critic of the nation's war in Gaza. So it couldn't be that the people of Missouri thought that Wesley Bell was a better candidate, more representing their views. It had to be some nefarious group of powerful pro-Israel political people intent on ousting a fierce critic of the nation's war in Gaza. Again, the New York Times showing, again, their true colors. It couldn't just be the campaign. It couldn't be that the people of the 1st District of Missouri had had enough of the radical progressive agenda of Cori Bush. No, it had to be some nefarious group behind the scenes that are pro-Israel. Okay, another. Oh my goodness, we're running late already. Maybe we will just go right to Walz. Now, we have a couple other quick things in the next break. Keep those comments coming in. I'm going to read them when we come back from break. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget, tomorrow on the program, I know everyone's favorite, former Congressman Joe Sempolinski. He'll be joining us tomorrow on the program right around 7. I always encourage you to tune in earlier, of course, right from 6. But sometimes he pops on a little earlier. And let's face it, from month to month, everything in the political landscape changes and has changed. And that continues to happen every time Joe is on. So I don't even remember where we last left off. I can't remember. I don't think. Yeah, I think Biden was still perhaps a candidate, wasn't he? Because the debate, the last time we were talking about the debate, I don't think we've talked to Joe since the shakeup of Kamala Harris becoming the official Democratic nominee for president of the United States without a single vote from a Democrat throughout her whole history to be president of the United States. Not this go around, not back in 2020. So we're looking forward to having Joe on. But stay with us. Time to take our first break as we are just getting started, hitting the ground running on this edition of Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I wanted to mention, yes, I highlighted the fact that Joe Sempolinski will be our guest tomorrow. I do not have a Steuben Senior Services Fund interview on today's program because there is so much breaking news. So I was able to move some things around. We will make those, and I know I said I guess every day this week. I just moved a few around, so this week and next week we are going to be very busy. Okay, so keep that in mind. A couple comments from viewers. The VP pick is actually more woke and far left than Kamala. He let his cities burn during the Floyd protests. Yes, I read a very good point, and I can't remember. I'll probably get to it later on in my stack of papers here. Someone saying that it's interesting that he let the cities burn while she was helping fund the bail of the people that were rioting. I thought that was an interesting point. Another comment, maybe they're thinking they'll keep the Trump voters home, thinking Trump will easily win. Or something really big is in the wind. Perhaps Democrats just want to pick up the pieces after whatever chaos happens. Now, I've heard a theory. I don't know if I subscribe to it, but I think it's an interesting point that some of the bigger names, like a Shapiro or a Gavin Newsom or Whitmer, or even Kelly, that maybe Mark Kelly, that maybe they're backing off. And I don't know if I subscribe to this, but it's something worth thinking about. That they're kind of backing off, thinking, well, Kamala was less liked than Biden until recently, until the media propped her up and talked about this momentum and all that, but less popular polling wise than Biden. So maybe, and the theory goes, that they're waiting out the 4 years of Trump. Then they'll run against Trump and his the constant attacks that the media will have on Trump and Vance and say, look how horrible it is. Look at the chaos. Look at how, you remember 2016 when Trump won and the media's constant attacks. Maybe they're just waiting patiently 4 years. Many of the people, the bigger names in the party, young, Not to say they're not going to campaign for Harris and all that, but didn't necessarily want to be a part of the ticket, or they didn't want to have to primary her because many said that would be political suicide once Biden endorsed her. Then we heard from sources that that was kind of a last minute, out the door, gotcha, for lack of a better term, from Biden, saying, okay, you're going to push me out. I'm not going to allow the primary happen. I'm going to show you that I still have a little power on my way out the door as my supposed friends stab me in the back. So I'm going to endorse Harris because, let's face it, it's been common knowledge that the Democrat Party didn't want Harris to be the nominee. They wanted Biden to back out earlier and let them have a primary when he didn't. That's why they propped him up for so long in what is one of the biggest scandals. And perhaps in presidential history, propping him up this whole time. So that's why, because they knew Harris was not a good candidate. And let's face it, and I'm not saying this, many in the media are saying, not in the media, excuse me, on Twitter and the like, the kind of the pundits are saying that this example of her VP pick is one of the reasons why Democrats have always been concerned, that she's not the most likable and that she makes poor decisions. And that's why sources close to the Biden family originally said that Obama did not want Harris, that he wanted Kelly to be the nominee. But Biden essentially cut the party off at the knees and instantly nominated, or I should say endorsed, Harris. Let's see what some comments are saying. I thought this is an interesting way to look at it. Now, you've got to keep in mind, and there's a piece we may get to later on, that the media is going to portray, I know I said that weird, Walz as a moderate. Be prepared for that. I have parts of his record here that we'll get to later on that proves quite the opposite, but that's what the media is going to push. Charles Blow from the Times, he said he brings a plain-talking, labor-friendly, Midwestern appeal to the ticket. He is Joe Biden 20 years ago. Now, I believe Charles M. Blow believes maybe that is a positive, being the Joe Biden of 20 years ago. But there are so many people announcing what a great pick this is, and that's what we do on this show. We give you all sides of the equation, unlike many other media outlets. Joe Biden tweeting out, the first major decision a party nominee makes is their choice for vice president. And Kamala Harris has made a great decision in choosing Governor Tim Walz to be her running mate. I've known Tim Walz for nearly 2 decades. And he goes on giving his endorsement. It got cut off here. Others, let's see. Oh, I pronounced Walz. Yeah, has anybody had that question? I don't. That's what Al Franken said. It's Walz, pronounced Walz. A great choice with an impressive record in Minnesota, making reproductive freedom a right, expanding paid family and medical leave, making school meals for students free, veteran, teacher, football coach, congressman, governor, and he's not weird. Yes, he's the one that came up with the weird. You may have saw at yesterday's rally, the weird, the creepy. That is going to get old if it hasn't already got old to you. But it is going to get bad with the whole weird line. I don't want to go through what all these Hollywood celebrities had to say. But Hillary Clinton said, I'm thrilled to see Tim Walz join the Democrat ticket. I heard someone, and this wasn't a political pundit, it's someone I know that, so it's anecdotal, but is a Democrat voter and will support the ticket no matter who's on the ticket. It's more of an anti-Trump vote, okay? But they compared and likened Walz to Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine was Hillary Clinton's running mate. Not they weren't saying it in a positive way. I'll put it that way. How's that? But back to what Hillary Clinton said. From providing free meals for school kids to implementing paid family leave in Minnesota, he's about doing good in all the ways you can. He'll be an incredible partner to our first woman president. Let's go win this, said Hillary Clinton. And numerous Hollywood celebrities just gushing over the pick. Josh Shapiro, who also appeared at the rally yesterday, saying, my work here in Pennsylvania is far from finished. There's a lot more stuff I want to get done for our Commonwealth. Over the next 90 days, I look forward to traveling all across the Commonwealth to unite Pennsylvanians behind my friends Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and defeat Donald Trump. All right. So we're going to talk. I'm running late again. I want to read your comments, the most important comments. But we're taking a look at all sides of the equation here. What Democrats are saying, how the media and Democrats are trying to, for lack of a better word, spin it into. And I'm not saying it's a negative or positive. I'm saying spin it into how they want to paint him. He was, according to polls, 71% of the people did not know who Tim Walz was before maybe this week or maybe even before yesterday. So now they have this short time period to paint him and his record how they want, just like they're doing with Harris. They're hoping that you haven't been paying attention for the last 4 years. So they're trying to create a narrative, create a premise of who these people are in this short time frame. So we're going to take a look at what all sides had to say when we come back. But most importantly, as always, most important side, what your opinion is. So I have those comments coming in. 607-358-3131. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hasselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. A few comments coming in. Good morning, Frank. Good morning. I would like to hear from a Democrat viewer on their thoughts about not having a say in this election. Yes, we open that up to any Democrat viewer, any viewer that has a concern or is fine with it. Maybe you're not necessarily a Democrat, but you're not voting for Trump. What is your thoughts of having? Because I watching the rally yesterday, it's just weird. Oh boy, I didn't mean to say that. I'm not gonna try to use that word. I apologize. I find it interesting that the talk is about voting and your vote matters, and you think, wait a minute, that falls weird on my ear when we know that the Democrat voters had absolutely no say in who their nominee was. So I think that's a good question. I will say to that viewer who sent this in, I'm not sure if I understand the second part of your question. Why they, meaning the Democrats, think it is or isn't okay to make no announcement. What does that mean? Out of curiosity. Because I think you have a very good text here, and I don't want to misunderstand it, because then it wraps up by saying this is not representation. Yes, I think, again, it boils down to anybody but Trump, right? So if the debate never happened, we would still be talking about Biden. They'd still be covering up his health and have no problem with it. As a matter of fact, if his polling would have stayed up after that debate, he would still be in there. Because it was never about his health or about the safety of the nation. It was always about electability. So I think, and I don't want to speak for anybody. That's why I love your text. I would love to hear from Democrat viewers, because I don't want to speak for anyone. But I think it's more about, and this is anecdotal because I've talked to people, friends that I have on the left, that it really is, it does not matter. It does not matter to us, that it all boils down to anybody but Trump. And I've heard that from numerous people. Again, anecdotal. I don't like anecdotal stories trying to prove a point necessarily, but that has been my interaction with people that are going to vote against Trump. So if you have a different opinion or the same opinion, let me know. Another comment from a different viewer. Perhaps they've embedded themselves so deep into the government, Trump will be irrelevant. That's in reference to how bad this viewer believes the pick is of Walz as her running mate. You know who didn't find the pick upsetting and is taking a victory lap? None other than the Democrat Socialists of America. The Democrat Socialists of America praised the selection of Tim Walz. Harris choosing Walz as a running mate has shown the world that DSA, the Democrat Socialists of America, and our allies on the left are a force that cannot be ignored. Through collective action, DSA and the U.S. left more broadly, have made it clear that change is needed. DSA members organized in our workplaces and unions to realign the labor movement to support Palestinian liberation. Now that points to, and we're going to get to New York officials here in just a second and what they had to say, but the idea, and it's a conversation that needs to be had, the idea that Josh Shapiro, who on paper makes more sense when it comes to needing to win Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, very tough state, kind of a purplish state, if you will, that many, myself included, thought it was a no-brainer to pick Shapiro. He's likable. The people of Pennsylvania, at least in the cities, but it's still, the polling numbers show that he's popular in Pennsylvania. I know we have Pennsylvania viewers. who are going to disagree with that. I'm just saying what the polls suggest. So the idea that she was going to pick Shapiro seemed somewhat like a no-brainer. And I think that there were some in the Trump camp and some on the right that kind of breathed a sigh of relief when it was Walz. That's not to do that corny thing where, oh, this is the best thing that ever happened to Trump, or this. I'm not saying that at all. I think Shapiro was a very formidable VP pick. But they're going for the happy warrior with Walz. I found it weird at the rally, too, talking about bringing joy back. I'm not sure if that's going to be one of their talking points. You know, they've got the weird thing, they got the creepy thing, but that Harris and Walz bringing joy back. But we'll talk about that probably later on in the program. So overall, what's your thoughts about the pick of Walz over Shapiro? Do you agree with many who are suggesting that because Shapiro is Jewish, that would not necessarily... I'm not the one saying this. Van Jones, the Obama advisor, is saying this. That it's an anti-Israel bigotry that has taken over a large section of the Democrat Party, and Harris recognizing she couldn't lose that faction of the Democrat voters. Because right now, we don't know how the Democrat voters will take to Harris. We have no idea. She never received a vote. It's not as if you can say, oh, wow, she performed very poorly like Biden did in certain states where it was protest votes, for instance. Or we don't know if there was other candidates on the ballot, how Harris would tend to work in different states. So this is all uncharted territory. Senator Chuck Schumer, and this is now we're hearing from, you know what? No, I'm running late. I'm going to take another break because when we come back, we're going to give you New York officials, and we've got a lot of them. New York officials and their reaction to Walz. We'll hear from our Congressman, Nick Langworthy. We'll hear from our senators, our governor, Lee Stefanik. Always a great read. So we have a lot to cover. I don't want to run too late. Keep those comments coming in because the most important quote-unquote pundit is you. Stay with us. We'll be right back, frankly speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on historic Market Street in Corning. Thanks to our friends at WRVO 89.9 radio out of Syracuse, I believe. They put together the New York officials' Twitter reactions, making it a little bit easier. Chuck Schumer, in reference to the VP pick, and again, I want to hear from you. That's the most important person to hear from, but it's important also to take a look at what our New York representatives have to say. Also, if you're from Pennsylvania, what are your thoughts this morning of your governor not being selected? Some articles were trying to suggest that PA just loves Shapiro so much that they don't want to lose him. There's also other pieces that said, Pennsylvania's not doing that great. So why would Harris select him? So what are your thoughts if you're a PA resident? But back to New York. Senator Chuck Schumer saying, great choice, Kamala Harris. Let's get to work. There's no doubt the Harris-Walz ticket will lead us to victory in November and build a future Americans can be proud of. Kirsten Gillibrand, now we just had her opponent on last Friday in that surprised guest appearance as Mike Sapricone. In the last minute, showed up to the Frankly Speaking studios, yes, in studio, and joined us for an hour-long interview. If you missed that, if you overslept, you're on vacation, you can find it on our YouTube page and also on our website, Big Fox's website. But Kirsten Gillibrand, excuse me, I always mispronounce her first name. Her opponent was on last week. I wish we had an opportunity to talk to him now, but I've actually been in talks back and forth. He will be on the show again, so don't worry. I know a lot of people really enjoyed his interview. But Gillibrand saying, Tim Walz and I both fought to pass the original Stock Act back when he was still in the House. I know he's a fighter, and I've been so impressed by everything he's accomplished for working families in Minnesota. I'm proud to support him as our vice presidential nominee. Representative Elise Stefanik, who herself was on the short list to be VP, but of course for Donald Trump, she said, Kamala Harris's selection of Tim Walz as her running mate confirms that the Democrat Party will anoint the most radical far left-wing ticket in history. The Harris-Walz ticket is dangerous for hardworking families or hardworking Americans. It got cut off right there at the end because Twitter does this when you print it out. Anoint. I like that she uses the word anoint. Mark Molinaro saying the far left hated Josh Shapiro because he's Jewish and supported Israel. They loved Tim Walz because he's anti-police and supported open borders. Tells you everything you need to know about the Kamala Harris campaign. And perhaps in one of the strongest statements from an elected official in New York, a no-nonsense statement came from our representative, our Congressman Nick Langworthy from the 23rd Congressional District. This is what his tweet had to say. Today's announcement by Kamala Harris shows just how tight of a stranglehold that the anti-Semites have over the Democrat Party. Wow. That's, again, Congressman Nick Langworthy tweeting that out just yesterday. Today's announcement by Kamala Harris shows just how tight of a stranglehold that the anti-Semites have over the Democrat Party. And to Congressman Langworthy's point, that's essentially what Van Jones is saying as well, the former Obama advisor, that there's that strain. I think he said that the Democrat Party is now marbled, I think was the word he used, and we'll get to the exact quote because I don't want to paraphrase because it was such an important quote. Marbled with the anti-Semitic bigotry, or maybe he worded anti-Israel bigotry, not picking Shapiro. I think there was a disappointment yesterday, if I'm being honest, with some of the reaction, the reaction of the media and the pundits spinning it, trying to be positive, but at the same time, you could tell there was that what just happened kind of feel to it. So that's from New York representatives. There's others, but not necessarily in our surrounding area. So I just wanted to mention the few there. Now, Tim Walz, according to Dan McLaughlin, is a far-left progressive whom Harris and the media will lie to make a moderate. And we've already seen that. Many calling him a moderate. Nancy Pelosi, I believe, pushing that message. So therefore the media will, because they have a short period of time to show who he is. Because again, the polls showing 71% of people had no idea who Tim Walz was before the announcement. So they have to get out ahead of it and paint him as a moderate, paint him as a smart choice. Just like they have to redefine and reimagine who Kamala Harris is and what her record is. But in the past, this was difficult. In the past, you had all that time, things would come out. There are only 4 months to get the message out of what they want. The media, as I've said before, will have no problem propping up the campaign for 4 months, saying the momentum is behind her. Boy, this might have been the best VP pick in history. This one may actually be consequential. You'll see articles like that. They love that he's doing this weird line and this creepy line and this kind of folksy. But let me ask you another question. I know I'm asking a lot of questions this morning. This folksy feel, doesn't it? And to Charles Blow's argument that he's Joe Biden 20 years ago, I could see that, the come on man, the things that got kind of annoying with Biden because they were repeated so often, the malarkey lines. At least with Biden, it seemed almost like in radio they called them crutches, words that you just use when you can't think of anything else. They just seemed second nature to Biden. Didn't yesterday's rally, if you watched it, didn't yesterday's rally seem a very forced folkiness to him? Now, I'm not saying his background doesn't show that he's kind of from a folksy background. I'm just saying some of the lines, some of the things he said seemed very scripted. Obviously, they were scripted, but seemed very labored, very forced. Much like Harris when she gives a speech. Very forced, some of the lines that they have in there. I don't know. I wasn't overly impressed. It just seemed maybe overly rehearsed after having watched the rally, or at least the majority of it. So how are we doing? Okay, so Dan McLaughlin says, by picking Walz as her running mate, Kamala Harris is banking on 2 things. First, Walz looks like a salt-of-the-earth Midwestern dad rather than a radical progressive. Second, the national political press can be counted on to hide from voters the fact that Walz actually is a radical progressive, and he's got the record to prove it. Judged only by first impressions, the 60-year-old Nebraska-born Walz doesn't fit the image of a hair-on-fire leftist. Gruff and burly, he looks at home in a flannel jacket and talks like a guy you'd meet at Home Depot. He's not one of the Democrat Party's endless parade of lawyers. He's a former football coach, manufacturing worker, and teacher who spent 24 years as an enlisted man in the Army National Guard. When he represented a congressional district that went for George W. Bush twice and Donald Trump once, the gun-owning Walz compiled an A rating from the NRA, but also a perfect rating from all manner of left-wing groups on other issues, and he's since flipped on guns. And that's very much a Gillibrand tactic, where you're strong on guns when you need to be strong on guns because your congressional district is pro-gun. But quick to drop that core belief. Since he was elected governor back in 2018, Walz has banked hard to the left. His aggressive lockdowns during COVID included a hotline for Minnesotians to snitch on their neighbors. One of the Minnesotians thrown out of work was George Floyd, then a recovering addict and ex-con who was trying to go straight. After Floyd was murdered by a Minneapolis cop, Walz sat by and watched the state's largest city burn while Harris raised money online to bail out the rioters. And that was that line I mentioned earlier in the broadcast. Systematic failures of oversight pervade Walz's administration. A 2022 bill to give hero pay to frontline pandemic workers ended up paying thousands of dead people. An audit found that only 60% of recipients definitely qualified for the money. Walz himself had text messages mysteriously vanish in violation of public records law. All this has been amply reported in the Minnesota media. The national press doesn't even need to investigate Walz. It just needs to read the coverage by its own local print and TV affiliates. And I don't want to go through his whole stance because we're going to get to that later on. But meanwhile, Minneapolis still struggles to hire cops and has lost 40% of its police force since 2020. Walz raised gas, sales, payroll, car licenses, and online delivery taxes and fees to pay for it all. Some boat registration fees doubled for the land of the lakes. Given how the national press coverage of Harris has brushed aside her left-wing record and let her get away without answering questions or doing interviews, she must be hoping that Walz and his record will get the same treatment, which it will. But if you read the book past its cover, Tim Walz is anything but a middle-of-the-road middle American, said Dan McLaughlin. What are your thoughts? Keep those comments coming in. We're running a tad bit late. I know I've been saying it all morning, but we have just so much to cover. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking. So many great comments coming in, waves that I missed because I had another screen up. So thank you. Keep those waves coming in. Keep the comments coming in. We're asking the question today, were you surprised by Walz? If you're from PA, we'd love to know what you think about your governor not being the VP. Okay, let's get to these comments, though. Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to add that as a wave. My opinion is that given the far-left views of Walz, Republicans will win Pennsylvania. This is because far-left people are not only anti-gun, but are also not in touch with reality. I wonder what it does for PA. And there has been left-wing pundits that have said, at the end of the day, even CNN saying this, that it could be numbers-wise a bad decision. Also, as some, and again, it's on Twitter, but as people that support Harris, or at least don't support Trump, saying Walz is a great pick until we lose Pennsylvania by a few thousand votes on election night. Another comment, Frank, can you imagine how much support for Republican values and disdain for Democrat values there would be if the legacy media told the truth and didn't work together to propagandize the American people against Republicans? If you look, it's fascinating to me as someone that's been in the media for so long and, obviously went to school for it like that, to see the difference in coverage, the glowing coverage of Walz's pick as compared to what happened when J.D. Vance was picked by Trump. They don't even hide it on the mainstream legacy media. I guess they just know that at this point what it is. But yes, I think there was a little bit of disappointment at least in their eyes, or maybe a little bit in their voice, that Walz was picked. I know I was shocked when I got the announcement, but in the mainstream media, there just seemed to be, well, they're starting with the glowing coverage, don't get me wrong, but just the difference, for instance, of showing the rally last night with Harris and Walz. But yes, I would agree with you. It's like I've always said too, that a Democrat could not stand being a Republican for even 5 moments. That's what made, with the media's coverage, because that's what made it so fascinating when Biden was being pressured to lead, because normally you have the rallying around of the troops around the Democrats. In this case, when you actually had media scrutiny for people in the House, up on Capitol Hill, being asked tough questions by the media, it was almost startling, because you don't see that. Do you support Biden? Do you call for him to step down from his campaign? It was really, really interesting. So I agree. I think if the media were true and fair with you, I think it would be a very different voting scenario. It would be a very different, really, country in a way, if people were just told the truth, or just told the truth, not with no type of bias. So yes, Ken, I do agree with you. Another comment from a different viewer: isn't Biden, the president, considered a moderate as well? Yes, great point. And I also love that you reminded us, myself and the viewers, that yes, Biden is the president. You may have forgotten. Boy, he went from being top of the media in a bad way after the debate to really very little talk about President of the United States, Joe Biden. Even with his endorsement of Walz as the pick for Harris, didn't even make the first in the article. They talked about what Harris had to say in her tweet before what Biden had to say. So yes, thank you for the reminder. We will try to remind viewers on a more consistent basis that Biden, the president, is the president. But yes, that's a great point too. He is considered a moderate. That's how they pushed him. They also pushed him as a unifier. And we see how, and they continue to. So you see, again, to Ken's point, and so many others, that's how the media operates. And that's why that piece from the New York Post by Dan McLaughlin from the National Review is such an important message, that the media is going to force you to believe that he is a moderate. Here's another comment from a viewer: Tim Walz is so bad he makes Kamala Harris look good. Well, maybe that was the ultimate goal. Maybe that was the spin on it. Pelosi says Walz is right down the middle. He's so moderate. Tim Walz is wonderful. This is former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Boy, who has still not spoke to Biden since Biden's ouster. Sounds like there's not a lot of love lost right now between, well, at least Biden to Pelosi. But she has not talked to him. And when asked, are they still friends? She said, I guess you'll have to ask him, which is not normally how you respond to someone who's actually your friend. Okay, Tim Walz is wonderful. And she had many good choices among the 6, and certainly among the 2. I'm a big fan of Governor Shapiro. Tim Walz, and I know very well. He served in the House. To characterize him as left is so unreal. He's right down the middle. He's a Heartland of America Democrat, and he was the chair of our Veterans Affairs Committee. And I don't want anybody to forget that, because he made tremendous, tremendous gains for our veterans, working with our folks on the Appropriations Committee and with the Speaker. We made more progress than had ever been made in the history of our country since the GI Bill under his leadership. Whew. Sorry, that probably hurt. That is really going over the top. 25 years in the National Guard, longest serving non-commissioned officer who has ever served in the Congress of the United States. So he brings the security credential, he brings the rural credentials, and he will do well in rural America. Really, it was mystifying to me to see someone that I worked with, shall we say, right down the middle, characterized on the left in this regard. He has her confidence, obviously. So it is, yes, it's shocking that anybody would call him far left. So he's right down the middle, is what we're being told. As CNN puts it, happy warriors, Harris and Walz propose an antidote to Trump's American carnage. This is the legacy media, folks. CNN and Stephen Collison. When we come back, stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We're receiving so many comments. You hear me typing in response. Keep those comments coming in, and welcome back to Frankly Speaking as we are wrapping up our number one. Boy, the time flies when you're having a blast. Let's take a look at some of the comments. I asked a question, where is Joe Biden? One viewer saying, yes, he is still president. Here's a comment. Biden is very busy posing while they're carving his face on Mount Rushmore. Good point. That could very well be the case. Next comment. Good morning, Frank. Good morning. How big a slap in the face is the Walz pick to the Obamas by not picking Kelly? Great point. Now, what this is in reference to, if you haven't been following along, is that Obama from the beginning wanted Kelly to be the nominee. But Biden, in his last act of defiance after being pushed out, said, okay, you want me out? Well, I still have a little power, and endorsed Harris right away. Anonymous sources report that Obama was furious because he wanted it to be Kelly. So by not picking Kelly as a VP, was that Harris also getting a slap to the face of Obama? Are the Biden and Harris, are they now saying, hey, we've got new king makers in town. We've got new power brokers in town, and it's Kamala Harris with an assist from Joe Biden. That's a great point. Thank you, viewer. We've had so many great points this morning. Some funny ones too. Here we go. For another comment just on the way out the door for the first hour. For economic prosperity and national security, you need to vote Republican. Otherwise, you can have another 4 years of decline. Thank you very much, viewer. If you're new to the show, you see the number on the bottom of your screen. Feel free to comment at any time. Do I have enough time? Because I don't want to focus on this. But just to show you an article oozing with bias from Stephen Collinson. Harris and Walz want to make America joyful again. The vice president's rocking rollout of her running mate on Tuesday sent jolts of energy through a huge crowd as the pair personified the extraordinary transformation of the 2024 election campaign. Americans, and I'm skipping ahead here because, boy, it gets bad. Americans have experienced a Trump presidency that threatened to tear the country apart, suffered through a pandemic that killed more than 1 million citizens, and endured grinding years of economic insecurity caused by inflation and high grocery prices. For most of this year, the former president has promised a second presidency of retribution. President Joe Biden, meanwhile, had been delivering searing warnings that his rival was tarnished the very soul of America, even as the haunting signs of the president's advancing age became increasingly painful to watch. When did it become increasingly painful, Mr. Collinson? Because the media didn't report on it. As a matter of fact, they called him, cheap fakes? And they called you conspiratorial, saying that he had health issues. It wasn't until Trump forced his hand and they had the debate live that you all of a sudden had this epiphany that maybe he's not doing that well. I am not. You know what? We are going to get to more of this piece, and I said I wouldn't. I just got to give you a little bit more of this bias just so we're on the same page. Stay with us. Hour number 1 in the books. Hour number 2 coming up in mere moments. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. Hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. I am your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. So many great comments coming in about the pick of Walz by Harris. We ended up the last hour, if you're just joining us, because I know a lot of people join right at 7 a.m. That's fine. I would recommend 6 a.m. But as much time as we can spend together, I do appreciate it. Were you shocked? The question is being posed. Were you shocked? I was. I thought for sure, especially when they said it was narrowed down to 2, I thought it was going to be Shapiro. I think like many of us did. But when it's not, we're now learning more about Walz. I was telling you about the bias that Stephen Collinson is portraying from CNN, talking about just how momentous this race from Harris and Walz is. Now they have a candidate, meaning Democrats, and a running mate who can draw a massive crowd, inspire the base, and project vigor and hope in a way that will take the battle to Trump over the frenetic last 3 months of the campaign. Multiple rally goers Tuesday expressed delight at the extraordinary twist in their fortunes, an event that conjured flashbacks to Barack Obama's Hope and Change rallies of 2008. Isn't that fascinating? We had a piece the other day that said the media is trying to portray Harris as the second coming of Obama. And isn't that exactly what Stephen Collinson just said? And they talk about the massive crowds. Again, this is a piece you would never see in any reference to Trump, because talk about the massive crowds. I don't know. A lot of times it needs celebrities to pack people in these rallies. Yesterday's rally, of course, is going to be full because you have the presidential nominee and the vice presidential nominee, neither who have ever received a vote for president by the Democrat Party. But I'll continue with one last statement that Stephen Collinson had to make at this article at CNN. The optimism, this is in reference to the rally, the optimism, laughter, and positive energy in Philadelphia on Tuesday felt like a different planet from the dystopian dirge of Trump rallies, which devolve into festivals of personal vengeance for a candidate who has tripled down on the American carnage mantra of his first inaugural address. He points to that inaugural address. I don't think he realizes, Stephen Collinson and those in the media, why that inaugural address was so impactful, because you had someone up on stage literally talking about the people that were to his back, as he would call them, deep state or the swamp. All right, let's take a look at what others had to say. We're giving you all sides this morning, and that's why we're posing the questions to you. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. Posing the question to you, what were your thoughts of the pick? Also, if you're a PA resident, what was your thoughts if that your governor, Shapiro, was not chosen? Van Jones, now CNN commentator, former Obama advisor, believes that Josh Shapiro's the fact that Josh Shapiro was Jewish played a role in this. Is it just because he's a moderate, or is there some anti-Jewish bias here? Jones asked, following the news. You also have an anti-Semitism. I want to get this exactly right, because this is Van Jones asking the question. It's not just because he's a moderate. Is it just because he's a moderate, or is there some anti-Jewish bias here? You also have anti-Semitism that has gotten marbled into this party, meaning the Democrat Party. You can be for the Palestinians without being an anti-Jewish bigot, but there are some anti-Jewish bigots out there. And there's some disquiet now, and there has to be. How much of what just happened is caving into some of these darker parts of the party? This is Van Jones, former Obama advisor, so I pose that question to you. Shapiro has received criticism from the far-left anti-Israel element of the Democrat Party for his previous stance on Israel and the Palestinian conflict. So what role did that play? And to have Van Jones be outspoken on this is quite shocking. And very interesting. I mean, you've got to give Van Jones credit, not necessarily a popular take on this from his party, not going to like that being a talking point. Some people had their hopes up, Van Jones said. Maybe you're going to get another shot at a Jewish vice president. We haven't had that for 2 decades, and now that gets pulled away. After asking if there was some anti-Jewish bias that influenced Harris's decision, Jones noted that anti-Israel Democratic voters can maintain their support for the presumptive presidential nominee. I think if you're a young Muslim or a young Arab or someone who's concerned about Gaza, it gives you a reason to stay excited about Kamala, because that was going to be hard for the party to digest, meaning that Shapiro pick. Hey, you got to give Van Jones credit for saying what so many people were thinking. If you are just joining us, we heard from our congressman, Nick Langworthy, a tweet we heard from, where he was saying similar. That it was, and I think I want to give the exact quote here. Today's announcement by Kamala Harris shows just how tight of a stranglehold that the anti-Semites have over the Democratic Party. So that's Congressman Nick Langworthy. And many on social media took to the same, what's the word I want to use, line of reasoning. Manhattan Institute's Ela Shapiro said the Walz decision, or selection, shows just how deep the Democrats' anti-Semitism problem runs. Former GOP congressman and also former gubernatorial candidate from New York State, Lee Zeldin, said it's amazing that despite America's right, left, and center agreeing that Josh Shapiro was Harris's best pick for VP, at the end of the day, Shapiro being Jewish disqualified him. Wow. It says so much about the state of today's Democratic Party. That was Lee Zeldin. And I think he raises a very good point that really right, left, and center were saying that Shapiro was the right choice. That's why I admit that I was shocked that it wasn't Shapiro, because it seemed to me to be a no-brainer. You need Pennsylvania to be president of the United States. You need to win it. So why not pick their, according to polls, popular governor? I know some PA residents may disagree with me. A popular governor. Why not pick him? He's a good campaigner, gives a good speech, seems to be charismatic. So to not pick him, Lee Zeldin said it. At the end of the day, Shapiro being Jewish disqualified him. Senator Tom Cotton said, let's be honest, Kamala is the most anti-Israel member of Biden's team, always siding with Hamas and Iran's interests. Shapiro and Walz's view on Israel aren't that different, but Harris catered to her pro-Hamas anti-Semitic base who oppose Shapiro because he's Jewish. We have so many, and we're giving you all sides of this, from Van Jones that we were reading Gillibrand, we were reading Schumer's take on it, but as I continue to say, the most important take is yours. So you hear all this. When you hear from our congressman, you hear from former gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin. We hear what the thought is of why Shapiro was not chosen, and now this should come as no surprise. A new poll from Fox News. Now, well, it's actually, excuse me, the article is from Fox News. It's from Siena Research Institute. We've talked about New York State, and for a moment while Biden was still in, people in the media were speculating after that big rally in the Bronx that Trump held that maybe New York was in play. Now, that was when Biden was still campaigning. I have told you numerous times on this program, I'm jaded, and I don't believe that that was the case. But listen to this number. Trump garnered the support of 50% of likely Jewish voters in New York, according to a new Siena Research Institute poll released Tuesday. A slight lead over Harris, who garnered the selection of 49% of respondents. While the lead for Trump is slim, it marks a dramatic change from the former president's prospects against Joe Biden, who in June led Trump among likely Jewish voters 52 to 46. However, the race has changed dramatically since the last poll, with Biden opting out last month, as you know. I don't think it should come as a surprise, and I think that number should only grow. We've got to take our first break. A couple quick housekeeping notes. Keep those comments coming in. Keep those waves coming in. Having a great discussion with you this morning. Tomorrow on the program, it's fan favorite. Former congressman, current assembly candidate, current chairman of the Steuben County Republican Party, Joe Sempolinski, will be joining us for at least the full 7 o'clock hour. Sometimes pops in a little bit earlier and comes on before 7. I'm hoping that's the case tomorrow because we have so much to talk about. As a matter of fact, the last time we talked with a former congressman, Joe Biden was still running for president. That's how long ago it was. So a couple weeks. But I've talked to Joe and booked the interview, and we had a nice chat. I think we're going to have a really, really fun interview, and I know people really enjoy the former congressman being on the program. So if you definitely want a question asked of the congressman, get them to me ahead of time. I'm going to do my best. We get so many questions while he's on and so many comments when he's on, I sometimes glance over them. So if you want a better shot at having the question asked, get them to me ahead of time, and I'll make a list before he appears on the program tomorrow. All right, so we're going to talk more about, obviously, the Walz decision. We got a few things here about the presidential race in general, a couple of New York State issues that I hope to get to as well. But most importantly, your comments. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. We're taking everyone's reaction to the Walz pick and presenting them to you so you can make an informed decision. Kamala Harris's decision to bypass Josh Shapiro shows she's bent the knee to the far left, says J.D. Vance. He's a really far left candidate. He's a really far left governor, but the fact that Kamala Harris selected him, I think, shows really, really poor judgment, and that she doesn't have what it takes to be president of the United States. Excuse me. Now, the pick of Walz actually got some media scorn for Kamala Harris. And I thought this was a very powerful statement from Washington Post columnist Megan McArdle. Now, let me just cough real quick before I do that. Sorry about that. Got a frog in my throat. Okay. Megan McArdle said, "My fears about Harris are that she is incredibly bad at public speaking and that she reliably makes bad political decisions. So far, she has done nothing to allay either fear. I'm not saying she can't win, but I wish she gave me more confidence." That, again, from Washington Post columnist Megan McArdle. The public speaking that we've seen, and we've talked about this on the program so often, has been from the teleprompter. It's fine. Candidates do that. But you're not seeing the real speech pattern of Kamala Harris. That's why many people have said it's so important for that debate. Just like it was important for the debate with Biden to cut through the media bias and show the person for who they really are. In the case of Biden, we saw what had been talked about in conservative circles, but of course the legacy media and the mainstream media kept covered up. And of course the scandal of the White House keeping it covered up, and Harris and others keeping it covered up. But we got to see, and all got to see, the whole world got to see, unfortunately, the decline of the president's mental health. In this case, I think you'll see a speech, if it happens. I'm not convinced it's going to happen because I think it does. I would hope the Harris campaign sees how that's could be a political trap for her. But we would see Harris's speech pattern, the word salads that she's become so synonymous with. Now, the left in the pop culture world has tried to embrace that and tried to twist it as a positive thing, a kind of a media viral thing, or a social media viral thing. But the voters, maybe lesser informed voters that right now are just being told that the Harris campaign is nothing but fantastic. It is a whole new Harris because the reins are off from the Biden White House. She is her true self and is fantastic, and the momentum's behind her. This trajectory is just marvelous. That's what will be told to us for 3 months. Will not take long. The media does not take, it won't be hard, if the media can cover up Biden's mental decline for 3.5 years. What's 3.5 months? What's 3 months for the media? So to cut through that, I think a debate is very important. And that goes back to this point by Megan McArdle saying that she had the two fears, the public speaking and that she always makes bad political decisions, which is also true. And she's done nothing to allay those fears, meaning that she did not like, again, Megan McArdle, the Walz pick. Professor and podcaster Damon Linker said, rather than pick the very popular governor of a neck-and-neck must-win purple state, Harris chose a dime a dozen blue state governor who gives feels to progressives. That's about what I'd expect from her a month ago. It is kind of typical. That's why, and again, it was anecdotal, but a friend who does vote and will vote for the Democrat ticket, no matter what, said that they felt it was very much a Tim Kaine pick. Tim Kaine being Hillary Clinton's running mate. And I thought that was a very good comparison. As this person says in a kind of a pop culture fashion, gives feels to the progressives, meaning the progressives like him. Author Matt Lewis declared, if you were a never Trump conservative who was hoping to rationalize a vote for the Democratic ticket, it just got harder. Saying it was a bad pick for Kamala. Former CNN pundit Chris Cillizza wrote, such a weird choice. While MSNBC's Brendan Buck said the pick feels very 2019. Buck said the VP doesn't matter a ton, but I think this reflects very poorly on her decision making. These are some heavy hitters saying this, or at least important names in the Democrat media circle, saying that this is just another example of Harris making bad decisions. Now, I like the viewer's suggestion that it was kind of a one last dig at Obama, telling Obama that he's no longer the kingmaker because we know Obama wanted Kelly, which I thought Kelly was a good choice too. I think Shapiro was probably the best choice for the ticket. And I know, I'm just saying this from a pure political standpoint. I think many people in the Republican Party breathed a sigh of relief when it wasn't Shapiro. Pennsylvania is a very important state. And so what those that want to support Harris in the media are saying, not all, but some, are saying is that this is reflects on her decision-making, and that's poor decision-making. Michael Goodwin says that this pick, see, we're giving all sides this morning. Michael Goodwin says this completes the progressives' takeover of the Democrat Party. And maybe that, again, an extra dig at Obama going with Walz, saying we're not going to do the normal political route. We're going to go extremely progressive. All the DEI boxes are checked, but there is no ideological or political diversity. They are two people who are physically different but share a single radical viewpoint, says Michael Goodwin. The contrast with just 4 years ago is stunning. Then Joe Biden was depicted as a centrist, to that other viewer's point, who picked Harris because of her biracial status and gender, and also because she checked the progressive box with her left coast policies. The aim reflected the traditional goal of most Veep choices: broaden the party's reach with a ticket that appeals to different constituencies. Yet with Biden off the stage, Democrats inexplicably are lurching even harder left. You know, back to that point that Biden kind of saying on his way out the door, okay, you guys stabbed me in the back, my own party that I've been loyal to for 50 years, and you ousted me. Fine, I'm going to pick Harris right away. I'm going to nominate her. And that made Obama upset, is what we learned from anonymous sources, but that's what we've learned, that he wanted Kelly to be the nominee. He wanted to see some type of open convention or quick primary process, and that did not happen. So it was kind of Biden saying, okay, you don't want me anymore? Well, I still got some power. I can still do this. So he did it. But also think of a man in Joe Biden who I don't even think is hidden, has an ego, who is very full of himself. Now, and that's why he stayed in the race so long. Now, one of the things that they say is Biden's legacy is the fact that he defeated Donald Trump. And that's why he said he wanted to run for a second term, because he's the guy that has been proven that he can beat Donald Trump. So that's really the biggest part in Democrats' eyes, biggest part of his legacy. Now, they're happy with the policies that he pushed through, the inflation or bipartisan infrastructure bill, the inflation, all that. They're happy with his policies, don't get me wrong. But the biggest part in the history books will be that he defeated Donald Trump in the Democrats' eyes. So I don't think it was just a dig at Obama saying, I'm going to pick Harris because you want somebody else. I think it's also to Biden's ego. I'm going to make this so tough on you because I'm going to pick a candidate that before the debate was polling even lower than Biden. I'm going to make you choose her, and then if she loses, which there in Biden's mind, I would think there's a likelihood that she could lose to Trump, then his legacy is even stronger. He can come out and say, see, I told you so. I had the proven record of beating Trump, but you wouldn't listen to me, and now see what you get. And that bolsters his legacy, and it really turns a lot of people off on the exact people that ousted, the big names that ousted Biden, the big power makers, the kingmakers in the Democrat Party that ousted him. Now the onus is on them. The anger of the Democrat Party would be on them, and the support for Biden would be even greater. Not the run again, but be the support and you were right mentality would be even bigger. So that's something I was thinking about yesterday, and it's kind of fascinating. I apologize for getting off on that tangent. All right, we got to take another short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, when we come back, your comments. And we are back. Broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. So many comments from viewers coming in. People have to remember, this is from a viewer, that Walz did in Minnesota in retaliation to allowing BLM and Antifa burn and destroy cities in Minnesota, crying in support of the peaceful protesters who created billions of dollars in damages, then bailing those poor oppressed protesters out of jail. And we had mentioned that one comment, and I can't remember who it was from, Dan McLaughlin maybe, that Harris, of course, part of that campaign to raise money for bail for those protesters. Walz is not the person. More reason for never Harris, never Democrat. Thank you, viewer. Another viewer said, I believe that the Harris-Walz ticket is an unexpected gift to the Republican Party. Even AOC is giddy. But I wouldn't be surprised if they suddenly make changes if the polls don't go in their favor. The Democrats will do anything to win. Well, they can make a change in Walz. She is the nominee. As of that virtual roll call, yes, never receiving a single vote. So to your point, at this point, what's really the difference if they get some pushback if they had to replace somebody? I don't know. But continuing, a different comment, obviously, from a different viewer. What a graphic description for the Democrats is a party that votes on feelings, whereas the Republican is based on thought and reasoning. Thank you very much, viewer, and all the viewers commenting this morning. So much to talk about. We were talking about Michael Goodwin and really saying that, and so many have said it, it's a progressive takeover. Isaac Shore said that with the far left Veep Tim Walz, Kamala Harris seals a fundamentally broken Democratic Party. 2 steps toward the fringe, 1 feigned step back towards the center. That's the ethos of the American left. In recent days, newly minted Democrat presidential nominee Kamala Harris has publicly disavowed much of the platform she ran on for president back in 2020, abolishing private insurance. Who would ever suggest such a thing? Banning fracking? As if. The Green New Deal's socialist jobs guarantee? Nah, never mind. But Harris's risible PR makeover was interrupted Tuesday by her selection of Walz. The Democrat Party's long march leftward will be interrupted by nothing, up to and including the specter of a second Trump administration. Now, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think Isaac Shore isn't a big Trump person. I could be wrong about that. But this is what it boils down to. Josh Shapiro was the obvious pick if Harris's foremost priority was walking the moderate walk and winning in November. And that goes back to the point where, is it poor decision making? Our congressmen and others saying it shows the power of the anti-Israel stance in the Democrat Party. I'm paraphrasing, of course. In the Democrat Party, former gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin saying the decision was made because Josh Shapiro was disqualified for being Jewish. And what Isaac Shore is saying is Shapiro was the obvious pick, and I think there's no denying that it was the obvious pick. That's why, at least to me, when I received a text message that said, "Did you see who they picked?" I verified a few different places because it seemed very unlikely to me that'd be Walz. But I'll continue. Not only is Shapiro enormously popular in an all-important Keystone state, he has stood up to the anti-Semites and iconoclasts on his own side while refusing to kowtow before the teachers' union like the rest of his party has. If Harris wanted to lend any real legitimacy to her supposed transformation, her campaign would be falling over itself to associate her name with his. There is no room, however, on today's left for genuine moderation. Again, though, I think there is an air of confidence with Harris, knowing that with the media's protection, she just has to run out the clock for 3 months, run out the clock and not make any huge mistakes, because the media is not going to talk about her past and her left ideals, far left ideals. They're not going to talk about that with Walz. They're already promoting him as a moderate. And in normal situations, these two things would be exposed because you'd have much more time. As of now, there's 3 months before we pull that lever. I know it's not really pulling the lever anymore, but you understand what I'm saying. The media that was able to cover this, to cover up Biden's mental decline for 3.5 years, should have no problem in protecting Harris for the next 3 months. But I'll continue with what Isaac Shore had to say. There is no room, however, on today's left for genuine moderation, or for that matter, for pro-Israel Jews. The only poor excuse for an argument mustered against Shapiro with the Democrat Party was the mindless, what's the word I want to use? Recitation? Yeah, why don't we use that? Of the thinly veiled anti-Semitic crack, Genocide Josh. And make no mistake, Walz is meant to serve as a reassuring wink at the far left. Harris might hope that Walz's grandfatherly look and folksy communication style will mollify swing voters, but he is, as Fox News' Callie McEnany put it Tuesday morning, a progressive in sheep's clothing. As governor, he threw his weight behind a bevy of legislation that would appall the median voter. And I don't want to go through that. You know that. We've been receiving the comments all morning long. As it turned out, Biden campaigned as a unifier, only to govern as a progressive puppet and pay the political price for his deception. Now, Harris is trying to get away with the same lie, but her decision to elevate Walz has betrayed her true intentions. How do Democrats repair the broken image and move back to the center? The answer for the foreseeable future, with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz as their standard bearer, is this: they can't. I'm giving you all sides this morning. Would love to hear your take on the Walz decision. As CNN said, the math behind why Harris picked Walz and why she may regret it. Yes, of course, they still took the opportunity to praise Walz and praise Harris, calling Walz a electoral juggernaut. Well, let me take a step back. Let me be more accurate. Shapiro currently holds a 61% favorability rating in Pennsylvania and outperformed Biden's 2020 baseline by 14 points. Whether that would have been enough to propel a Harris-Shapiro ticket in Pennsylvania is a question mark, though political science literature suggests it very well could have. That's why you saw many people on Twitter and elsewhere that are Harris supporters saying, yeah, Walz is a great pick until we lose Pennsylvania by a few thousand votes on Election Day. What we can say, though, and this is again from CNN, is that Walz is not likely to help Harris with many swing votes. He did less than a point better than Biden in Minnesota when he won re-election in 2022. In fact, Shapiro seems to have done better with white voters without a college degree in Pennsylvania than Walz did with the same demographic in his state 2 years ago. And even if Walz has been an electoral juggernaut, it remains to be seen whether he can help the Democrat ticket outside his home state. If Harris ends up losing Pennsylvania and the election by a small margin, it will be one of history's great what-ifs. Did he not choose Shapiro because she was afraid of the online left? Oh, is that what they're going to call it, the online left? Interesting. Harris, of course, is hoping the election won't be that close. She seems to have momentum, and the Walz pick will probably do nothing to impede it. Won't impede the momentum. See, they just want to lay the groundwork that momentum's still growing. Nothing but momentum for the Harris campaign. Let's take a short break, then we'll read some more of your comments. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. As I mentioned earlier, no Steuben Senior Services Fund section of the program this morning because we had so much news to get to, but we thank Steuben Senior Services Fund, and we have a great one to make up for it tomorrow. Former Congressman Joe Sempolinski will be joining us. Let's go, and that's right around 7 a.m. tomorrow, but he gets in earlier, so you want to tune in for the full 2 hours starting at 6 a.m. Let's go to viewer comments. First one up. Given the far left views of the current Democrat duo, I'm trusting that all Democrats are not so blind and that therefore moderate Democrats will at least not vote Democrat. Oh, do you think it helps RFK Jr.? I don't know who they would vote for because even a moderate Democrat's not going to vote for Trump most likely, but we'll see. Good point. Thank you. A different viewer here. Frank, I've often wondered if the mainstream media is lying to us on their own accord, or are some of them being blackmailed by the Democrats to spout these lies? I can't speak to that specifically, but I would say that I don't think there's any need to blackmail the journalists, quote-unquote journalists in the mainstream media. They want to push the narrative. First of all, if you go to journalism school, you're taught that perhaps the greatest thing you could ever do is sit down or bring down a sitting Republican president, like Woodward and Bernstein. There are certain things that they teach you that it makes you inherently biased towards the Democratic Party. So I don't think they need to be blackmailed. I think they willingly support these Democrat ideals and are willing to push them at the risk of losing their job, at the risk of losing revenue. Because look at the media right now. Axios, far left Axios, laid off 10% of their staff. If you look at the legacy media and the left media, but they call it, just the media, it is not a successful business model pushing this bias. But again, at the end of the day, you're taught in journalism school that pushing the Democrat agenda is much, much more important than your financial security and your job. Getting invited to those cocktail parties with the supposed brilliant Democrat elites is more important. Different comment from a different viewer. That'd be weird if it was the same comment from a different viewer. Frank, I thought I would write a speech for Kamala. Oh, no. Uh-oh. I am the Democrat candidate for the presidency of the United States. The United States is a big country in the Northern Hemisphere. The president of the United States is a very important job. The Democrats love the United States, and I, as the Democrat president, will love the United States. The Republicans hate the big country in the Northern Hemisphere called the United States, which the Democrats love. Our Republican president, especially Donald Trump, would hate the United States, which I will love if elected. Thank you, Ken. Not that far off. That's why, obviously, staying with teleprompter thus far in her short campaign. I see one of the things that they're pushing. The Trump campaign came out and said that Walz, while governor, pushed to allow convicted felons to vote. And I think there's something that the left doesn't understand. The convicted felon label that they keep putting on Trump, they may think that does a lot of damage, but in many instances it just galvanizes people to Trump because they saw it as lawfare. So they're just saying such things as, does somebody want to tell him that he's a convicted felon, that he shouldn't be running for president? I don't know. I think they missed the point entirely on that. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, in their first appearance together, push an AR-15 ban. That's, they did the old narrative. It's kind of like when someone tells you that they're an independent or that they're registered Republican, but they always vote Democrat, and you go, oh, that's just a label. You're trying to give yourself some street cred that you're better than the actual party once you got in there. The same thing goes with this. Oh, Walz is a gun owner, big gun supporter. But, quote, he realizes we need reasonable gun safety laws in America. For the first time, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris affirmed their joint support for firearm registration checks, gun confiscation laws, and banning commonly owned firearms. That was coming from the gun owners of America. Oh, thanks for the waves coming in. But there's a lot. I don't even know if I want to get into this because we're going to learn a lot about it. And I do have a couple things I want to talk about outside of Walz, if you can believe it. But there's definitely some interesting points in Walz's background that normally is not what you look for in a VP candidate. According to the New York Post, Walz was once arrested for drunk driving after he was pulled over for driving more than 40 miles per hour above the speed limit. Walz, 60, who was 31 at the time and worked as a teacher, was caught on police radar driving his silver Mazda 96 miles per hour in a 55 zone just before midnight, September 23rd, 1995. When the trooper approached his window, he detected, quote, a strong odor of alcoholic beverage, end quote, emanating from the vehicle. After flunking a field sobriety test, he submitted to a breath test, which pegged his blood alcohol level at 0.128, well above the state's legal limit of 0.08. He was arrested and taken to Dawes County Jail. He was given a blood test, but those results could not be immediately confirmed. He then pleaded the charges down to reckless driving, which required him to admit that he drove a vehicle in a manner as to indicate an indifference or wanton disregard for the safety of persons or property. After accepting the plea deal, his lawyer attempted to explain that his client was speeding because he thought the trooper was, quote, somebody chasing him. Alleged he didn't fire up the light bar in a timely fashion. I was surprised to learn that. That's normally kind of disqualifying, but they said that not just because of the progressive agenda, but Harris and him just kind of hit it off lately. I know that they're coming out with some of the people that were in his battalion, his National Guard battalion, not saying the kindest thing about Walz, saying that he left the battalion, quote, hanging and slithered out the door, end quote, before the Iraq deployment. In a letter posted to Facebook in 2018, as he first ran for governor, retired Command Sergeant Major Thomas Behrens and Paul Herr said Walz retired from his 24-year tenure in the National Guard after learning that the battalion would be deployed to Iraq, despite allegedly assuring his fellow troops he would join them. I don't want to read the whole speech. I'm sure you found this for yourself already. That is at the New York Post. So just things we're reporting on that you probably won't see from that legacy mainstream media. Harris's pick of Tim Walz failed to act as the BLM rioters burned Minneapolis in 2020. That's what a state Senate panel found. Over 1,000 businesses were burned and a police station was burned to the ground. He was accused by the Republican-controlled Minnesota Senate's Joint Transportation and Judiciary and Public Safety Committee of delaying the deployment of the National Guard, failing to coordinate with local police, downplaying the possibility of riots, and allowing his adult daughter to access confidential information about law enforcement movements that put first responders at risk during the 4 days of rioting that swept through the Twin Cities. So giving protesters warning, having his daughters check those records so that they knew where and where not to be. again, we knew this from the beginning, but this is who was selected yesterday. So I would love to hear your opinion on it. Now, if you were a Shapiro supporter, maybe you're a resident PA, what are your thoughts of not picking Shapiro, which, as one article said, both left, right, and center all agreed was probably the best choice. Love to hear your thoughts. Keep those comments coming in, and we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. And we are back. You know, for someone that was so relatively unknown, Walz, I think they said 71% of voters were not familiar with Tim Walz. It's fascinating to see how many people in the media world, the pundits, are now saying, I didn't want to say it, but I supported him the whole time. I didn't want to tip the scales in any way, shape, or form, but boy, this is who I was rooting for from the beginning. I just had another piece. I'm not even going to get to all of it, but just fascinating that is now, I knew it, and I loved it from the beginning. Pragmatic Midwestern governor or cornucopia of liberal psychosis? The race to define Tim Walz begins. Yes, well, there's only 3 months. Can they run out the clock? Now, J.D. Vance, and I hope you don't mind, feel free to continue to comment on Walz, on whatever else you would like. I'm going to move on from Walz because we have very little time left together, and there's a few things I want to make sure that we hit on. J.D. Vance knocked Kamala Harris for not doing any interviews since taking over for Biden. Keep in mind, this is why I keep saying the term running out the clock before November. Because shouldn't the media, who has a vested interest in interviewing the Democratic nominee for president, someone where there's numerous stories that you could, numerous questions you could ask her, meaning, did you cover up Biden's health issue? Does it concern you or your party that you never received one vote from a Democrat to be the presidential nominee? Why did you pick Walz? Why? The list can go on and on. You would think the media would say, hey, where's our interviews? Where's that press conference? This has been such a shocking point in political history, like something we've never seen before. Shouldn't we have an opportunity to talk to you outside of hearing what you say from a teleprompter speech? Shouldn't we get your opinion in person? Let's see what you have to say on some major issues. But there isn't any pushback. The media is trying, along with the Harris campaign, to run out the clock and not define, to use that term that article said, not try to define her or look at her past or the mistakes she's made in the past, or the radical left things she supported. That's not what it's going to be. All of it is going to be happy warrior. That line, and the media is already pushing it, the line that they used last night, she brings back joy. You're going to hear about the momentum that she has, the trajectory that she is a brand new person from the Harris we thought we knew. Now that the reins are off from the Biden White House, you get to see the true Kamala Harris. That is going to be the media's coverage for 4 months, 3 months. That's why I've said from the beginning, I do believe a debate is so important that Trump needs to take a debate so we can see the true Harris, because the media is not going to push it. But I'm glad that J.D. Vance is pointing this out. Kamala Harris, our border czar, is asking the American people to make her the next president of the United States. And yet, for the past 16 days and counting, the American media has been unable to ask her a question. Now, agree or disagree with me and President Trump, nobody would dispute that we will go anywhere and we will talk to anyone. Yes, not scared of talking with anybody. Harris seems to be quite the opposite. But that's a good point. Why shouldn't? I mean, for a party that didn't even get to have a say in their nominee, don't they deserve to have the press ask her some questions so they can learn more about the candidate that was forced upon them? I think that's a very fair point. And it goes to show you, again, a topic that we've been discussing all morning long, the bias in the media, because they're not calling that out. They're not saying, wait a minute, we should have a right to talk to you, considering the American people need to get to know you in 3 short months, you and Walz, because you never got a single vote from a Democrat to be the presidential nominee. So it's only fair to have your voice heard and explain to the voters why you believe you should be president of the United States. Where do we want to go? Biden-Harris's signature border program has allowed at least 3 ISIS terror suspects to enter the United States. 3 migrants from Kazakhstan who were arrested in the U.S. for allegedly having ties to ISIS used the Biden-Harris administration's CBP One app to get into the country, according to a new report. Additionally, at least 99 other suspected terrorists have been released into the U.S. in the last 2 years after crossing the southern border. Maybe another question the media could ask Harris, if they were mentally curious at all and not just worried about running out the clock. We've got to take another short break, and then we're going to wrap things up. So get your last-minute comments in. We've had a great program this morning. So many very informative comments and questions. So keep them coming in as we wrap up today's edition. Stay with us. And we are back, wrapping up this edition of Frankly Speaking. Comment from a viewer on the way out the door. I'm normally a fairly optimistic person, but I will say that I'm feeling despair like I've never really felt before. I talk to people and they just check out or say I'm too engaged and need to lighten up and have fun. Well, how's that working? And I'm glad our military didn't adopt this attitude in the past. Thank you for that comment. I understand that's why I'm concerned about these next 3 months, where the media is going to try to run out the clock because they know there are so many people checked out. And just in passing, if you're not paying attention to news, you're not doing your research, in passing you might hear, oh, I hear Harris has momentum, or I hear she's a lot better candidate than they originally thought, et cetera, et cetera. And it sticks in their head. It's aimed at the low information voters. So yes, I can understand your despair. Another comment, and to this viewer's comment, yes, an Iranian agent tried to hire a hitman for possible assassination of Trump and other U.S. politicians. Someone asking about this. An alleged Iranian agent plotted to hire a hitman, I don't know why I'm saying that so weird, to assassinate U.S. government officials, including possibly former President Donald Trump, according to sources and a federal criminal complaint. Pakistani national Asif Merchant, 46, is accused of planning political assassinations in New York City in August or early September and paid $5,000 in advances to men he believed to be contract killers. Another thing, just as another quick update as we are almost through here, Yahya Sinwar is to replace Henya as Hamas's political chief. So the mastermind, the chief architect behind the October 7th terrorist attack in Israel, is replacing the Hamas leader that was assassinated just recently. So that's just a quick update. How am I doing on time? The New York Post editorial board published this, and I know it's a little bit of old news for us, but I think it's worth mentioning. At long last, a corrupt New York public official has been forced to forfeit their taxpayer-provided pension after being convicted and sentenced to prison. That is Steuben County village clerk Ursula Stone, who allegedly stole $1.2 million over her 19-year career. She was prosecuted under the state's anti-corruption law, and she has agreed to give up her $1,920 monthly pension. This is, unfortunately, new in New York State. This is the first such forfeiture in New York State history. We wish, this case, this is from Tom DiNapoli, our comptroller. This case should send a clear message that those who dishonor their public office will face serious consequences. We wish, says the New York Post editorial board, but all too many politicians will fight back a lot harder and more cleverly than an upstate town clerk, yes, right out of Addison. And never mind that voters overwhelmingly support stripping pensions from public officials and state workers convicted of felonies related to their duties. Such forfeitures weren't even possible until the legislature passed an ethics reform in 2011, and voters amended New York State's Constitution in 2018 to allow it, and yet this is the first time it's been used. But how many district attorneys will take the political risk of going after more powerful politicians other than a Addison clerk? And who will dare to do the investigation? While the law now allows for the basic justice, we fear New York's political culture will still shield the worst offenders. Hey, congratulations to Corning Inc. Corning Advanced Optics made the glass mirror for the Vera C. Rubin Observatory, which I was not familiar with until today. Having seen this article on the Empire Report. But the Rubin Observatory is a federal project jointly funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation and the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Science, and it is located in Chile and is groundbreaking new astronomy and astrophysics observatory. So congratulations to Corning Inc. All right, we are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Tomorrow on the program, fan favorite former congressman, current assembly candidate, current chairman of the Steuben County Republican Party. Joe Sempolinski will be our guest in the studio tomorrow. So get your questions in ahead of time or live during the show. We'll have so much to catch up on, so much to talk about on tomorrow's show you can only imagine. So tune in every weekday morning starting at 6 for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV Big Fox. We will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. I look forward to it already.